I'm a Marine. I've been in the Marine Corps for 20 years. I'm a recon sniper. On a detachment with 12 other recon snipers and stuff.
Oh, wow.
And back in 1992-ish, beginning in 93, me and my unit were in the Blue Ridge Mountains of North Carolina training on a recon mission to where we were they had went out before us about 24 hours and placed a target out in the middle of this partial blueberry field, and I would say like sawgrass field up in the mountains. And our objective was to go and observe it, take it, and recon on it. So we began to do that. We moved into position and everything, and we had a thermal optic zone, so we'd be able to see our night vision. And we got around the field. It was like I would call it like a clamshell. We weren't all the way around the whole field, but we had like three quarters of it, covered. And I don't know, we were there about 10, 15 minutes, doing our job, estimating how far the target was away and, getting our coordinates down. So if we had to take a shot and stuff, we'd be able to do it. And all of a sudden, through my night vision goggles, I see this black figure. It came up over the hill, which didn't have any woods in it. It was towards the back of our target. And it kept proceeding towards the target. And I got on the radio on my NAPCOM, and I asked the other guys, I'm like, are y'all seeing this? And they're like, yeah, man, well, what is that? I said, I don't know. I said, let's just keep quiet and let's see what's going on. Well, this figure would continue to come towards our target. And when it got up to the target, it's probably like 50 to 60 yards away from us. And there it was. It was 8 to 9.5 foot. I'm assuming it's a male Bigfoot. This thing was huge. I mean, its chest and its shoulder width was probably 3.5 to 4 feet wide. It tapered down to his stomach, and his legs. This creature was just humongous. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I believe in Bigfoot all my life and everything, and so, I radioed the guys. I'm like, are y'all seeing this? They're like, yeah, we see this, man. What is this thing? I said, man, I think it's a Bigfoot. And of course, you hear a couple guys laugh on, your intercom. I'm like, well, then you tell me what it is then. They're like, well, I don't know. I said, they're like, what do we do? I'm like, well, we can't shoot it. I said, because it's, non-combative. It doesn't have a weapon or anything. I'm like, let's just keep watching this thing. So it stayed there about 15, 20 minutes. It walked up to the target, and it sort of moved it and jiggled it around. And like I said, it was in a partial blueberry field. So it bent down, and I assumed it was eating like blueberries and everything. And one of my buddies radio over, he's like, I'm going to move a little bit to the right so I can get a better angle on this thing. I'm like, okay. Well, undoubtedly, this creature heard him, and it stood up. And it let this guttural roar out that, I mean, it resonated in your chest like you're at a rock concert with a bass, beating in your chest. I mean, you could feel it to your soul. We all froze, and they're like, what do we do? I'm like, just stay quiet, let this thing do what it's got to do. And, we'll get up out of here and leave this thing alone. And it stayed around for about another 5-10 minutes, and you could tell it would raise its head up in the air like it was trying to smell, trying to pick up a smell trace of whatever he heard. But he couldn't see us because we're in full camouflage, to the hilt. And he stayed there about another 15, 20 minutes, and he went on off about the way he came. And so the guy's like, okay, when we got to move, I'm like, let's just give this thing a little bit of time to get away from us, and everything, and then we'll pull out and we'll back up. Well, I'd say about 4 or 5 minutes after this thing disappeared, we heard the same roar that it made again, but this time it was coming from behind us, up another, like a ridge in a mountain. And the guys are like, man, there's two of them here. I'm like, okay. I said, just sit still, don't move. Let's just see what happens. So we were there about another 15, 20 minutes. The first Sasquatch reappeared back into the field where he was at before. And he was just pacing back and forth. Like he walked like 5 feet, turn around, walk another 5 feet, turn around, put his nose back up in the air, and he would smell. And then he made, I don't know exactly how to explain it. It sounded like he was talking, but he's like, but it's a little deeper. And then right behind us, we hear this big, like, it sounded like a boulder coming down the mountains. And I was like, well, is this thing like throwing rocks, or is this it coming down the mountain or whatever? So we stayed, concealed and everything. and we were all spread apart about 40 yards apiece, and all of us 12 guys. And all of a sudden, this other one comes walking right in between my two buddies, Mark and Brian. And like, dude, this thing just come walking right by us. I said, where's it going? He's like, it's going right to the field where the other one's at. So this other Sasquatch came through, went through right through the field, met up with the other one, and they stood there a little bit, and they, like I said, both of them put their head up in the air like they were trying to smell and everything. And my buddy on the radio was like, he said, dude, do you see how big these things were? Now, the second one was a little bit smaller than the first one. I say it was about 6 foot, 6.5 foot, probably 650 pounds. I'm assuming that's a female Bigfoot, just because the size of the male.
Yeah, or like a juvenile or something.
Exactly. Either one, or, whatever. So, we have on our scopes and everything, we have cameras that's hooked up to them that we can automatically record things. Like, so when we deploy to Iraq and Afghanistan, when we make our shots and everything, it's legitimate proof that we can send back to our CEOs saying, we actually had to take this guy out because he had a gun or RPG or something like that. So 3 or 4 of these guys started clicking these infrared photos of this stuff and everything. And I say these 2 creatures, they stayed in the field about another 10 minutes, maybe 15, and then they moseyed off back where the first one came from down the hill, and we didn't hear anything. So we stayed around about 25, 30 minutes, and then I called everybody, to rejoin and regroup down the road. There's a little creek there that split into the road, but we came in on. So we got there, and we were talking and everything, and they were like, man, what the hell was that thing? I said, what did you see? And everybody explained the same thing, that I saw. So, I'm like, okay. I said, well, we got to go back to HQ, and we got to turn our stuff in. I said, I'm going to report to my CO. So I went in and I reported to my CO, and I pulled all the discs out of the cameras on the scopes, and I brought it to him. I said, now I want you to look at this and tell me what you think. Well, he puts his laptop open, he sticks it in, and he types his password in, whatever, and he starts pulling up photos. All of a sudden, he closes his laptop, pulls the card out, and he's like, I need the rest of them. So I hand it to him. He's like, Mr. Brown? I said, yes, sir. He's like, you never seen nothing. You were not here. You need to bring the rest of your guys into my office. I need to talk to them one at a time. I'm like, yes, sir. So I went back and I told them, each one of my guys went in, the same thing. You never seen this. You don't say nothing to nobody, and you better forget where you're at. So when we left, I'm like, well, what the hell's going on with this? I mean, are they like protecting this thing, or do they know something that's going on? It's like, I don't think we did anything wrong. And so we got back to Camp Lejeune. That's where I was stationed at. And about 2 weeks after that, we had a guy from the FBI come and interview both. I'm here trying to tell my story. I do thoroughly believe that our government knows these things are out there. And for some reason or not, they're protecting them or doing something, but something just does not feel right about this whole situation.
Did you have any questions for the FBI about what you saw?
Yeah. I asked him. I said, why are you? I said, why is the FBI even involved in this? He's like, we're the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I said, I understand that. I said, but this is a military matter. He's like, it does not matter. He said, you answer to us. I'm like, answer to you? I said, we answer to the president, not to you and my commanders. He's like, on this certain situation, you answer to me. I said, okay. He's like, you keep your damn mouth shut and you don't say nothing. If you do, I'll ruin your career. You'll be out of the service. I'll put a black flag on you, and you will find it very hard to find work the rest of your life. I was like, yes, sir. I said, okay. I'll deal with what you're saying. I understand. I said, now I can't guarantee all the rest of my men are going to do the same as me, but I'll do what you tell me to do. So I went on out, and I got back to my unit. We got deployed to Iraq in '93, and I did 12 months tour over there. And we had a guy that came in. He used to be a smoke jumper. Jump in the fires, and do stuff like that. He was at the Mount St. Helens eruption when it went off, and they were fighting the fires down there. And I was telling him, I didn't say anything about my story or anything else like that, but I had on my keychain, I had a little Bigfoot, symbol. And he seen it and he's like, man, he said, I want to tell you something. I'm like, what? He's like, me and my buddy was fighting a brush fire. And he said, we had one of these things come down out of the mountain. He said he was burned on his arms and on his chest and torso area. And he came to us for aid. And I said, what? He's like, yeah. He said it was a Bigfoot. I'm like, I said, it was a Bigfoot? He's like, yeah, man. He said, this thing was like 10 foot tall, 1,000 pounds. I said, so what happened? He's like, well, we administered first aid to him and we called it in. He said, next thing I know, he said, there's a Black Hawk helicopter coming in with no markings, no identification on it, which is, it cannot be. You got to have markings on the stuff unless it's some secretive operations that doesn't have, decal numbers on it. He said they came in, landed, took the creature, put it in the chopper, told both of them to go about their thing, and they never seen nothing. And he said the chopper flew off. He never thought nothing about it. And he said, I'm here now, and I see you have a Bigfoot thing. And he said, dude, he said, I seen one, and the government freaking took it. And I'm like, that does not surprise me at all.
What do you think happened to it?
I think they, this. Well, me being in the military as long as I have been, I'm gonna tell you this, about flying saucers, aliens, and all this stuff, and Bigfoot and stuff like that. This is all true, man. I mean, it's from talking to pilots and stuff that seen things and everything while they're flying in combat or either training or whatever. And just my mother was a Cherokee Indian. She grew up in the Blue Ridge Mountains in North Carolina, and she would tell me about these families of Sasquatches that lived in a certain area, and that they would often go there, and see things, trees bent over, different structures, like places where they bed down and eat. There was always sometimes like deer that was ripped apart that they were feeding on and stuff. And my grandmother said it just came to be a way of life. They knew not to go over there and mess with them and stuff like that. And the Sasquatches didn't mess with them on their homestead and stuff, but she said you would always hear like howls and whoops and stuff, which weren't coyotes that, didn't register any known animal around that area. And so she lived with it I believe she passed away when she was 86 years old. And she's like, I lived with it all the way to the time that I moved out. And she got a job in Durham, North Carolina as a nurse. And she met my grandfather, then they got married. But as I was coming up, she would tell me about these things. So, I just put it in the back of my mind. I thought it was, okay, whatever. Is this some of this tradition of Indians and stuff like this, which they have a lot of? I mean, if you look back to the records, Indians talk about Sasquatch a whole lot, being in their culture and where they're at, throughout the United States of America, all out through the hills. I mean, for hundreds of years, these things have been reported. So, yeah, I mean, it really opened my eyes up. I'm a believer. I always believe that, I think the government is hiding things because if you look at prolifically where all these creatures are at is in the Pacific Northwest, and stuff like that, Seattle, you're talking about a lot of trees up there. And if they were to classify this animal as being extinct or protected, it would stop the logging community altogether. And you want to talk about a lot of money being lost, that'd be a lot of revenue being lost from them not being able to log these areas where these creatures live. So I believe, they put a handle on this thing, they keep it quiet, so people don't know about it. So then I do believe they have a few of them, in probably cages or something, whatever, doing research on these things, trying to, figure out what they are, where do they, come from in the human, genetics of, Darwin's theory of relativity and stuff like that, because there is a missing link out there between us and apes. And, I thoroughly believe this is our missing link right here.
Wow, man, that's have you had any other experiences after that?
Yeah. When I got out, I did 5 tours in Iraq and everything. And then I finally, stopped doing the, missions overseas and everything. I came back to the base. I'm a drill sergeant now and everything. And we were doing some maneuvers in Nevada. I really can't tell you where it's at and everything, but it's pretty close to Area 51 and everything like that. And they had a detail that went out and they were putting survey markers out. It was towards the mountains in Nevada on the northwestern side of the state and everything. And they came back and they said that when they went back to start reinstall these things that happened were all pulled up out of the ground and laying sideways. And they're like, we buried these things 4 feet deep in the ground. And they said they have to use actually a backhoe to pull them back out. And I'm like, so what do you think it was? He's like, there was footprints around there like 16 to 18 inches long and like 8 inches wide. And he's like, dude, there's something out there that does not want this stuff there. And that is the last thing I heard about anything about Sasquatches and stuff like that. And that is so funny. That's so funny that it's so close to Area 51 and all that kind of stuff. It sort of makes you wonder if, they know where these things are and the government buys this land up so, keep track of these things or do whatever they're doing, because something is definitely not right in the hen house.
Yeah, definitely. And, we have our national parks and stuff, and I think they're all over. Oh,
yeah, man.
There's lots of stories.
Yeah, they're all
Arkansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, all the way down to Florida.
Yeah, you got the grass man, you got the skunk ape, you got the abominable snowman. I mean, I think they're a world phenomenon, to tell you the truth, because, any culture you go to, any country you go to, even Australia and everything, they have cave art, over there with like Bigfoots, some of them's got 6 toes, they can show that different kind of stuff. I don't know about the 6 toe. I was wondering if that was always like an inbreed thing, but I do believe they live in family. Well, I know they live in families, so they're like a mom, dad, the siblings, the kids and everything. And I think, there's a lot of them out there, but, if you look at how many hundreds of thousands of millions of acres that no man has ever walked on in this, the United States, we think we covered everything, but we haven't, man. There's a lot of places out there that nobody's ever been, you just can't do it. Yeah, right. It's too vast. I mean, it's too vast. And for a creature that's so smart like that, that is exactly the perfect, place for him to be, because they are trained to avoid us and, not be detected by us and not be seen. And, and I've had reports of people saying they see like orbs and everything going through like the woods and everything. And next thing you know, there's a Bigfoot.
Right.
And then, I keep reading things, and all of a sudden they'll see a Bigfoot shadow and everything, and then they blink their eyes and it's gone. Well, where'd it go? Did it just disappear? Did it go into another dimension or something like that? Yeah, I believe it's tied up a lot with aliens and I don't know how you say it, wormholes, if that's what you want to explain it, and it's a shame, whatever it is, man, people, they think, the government thinks that we're not able to handle things no more, they'll ruin our religious system and stuff like that. But, nowadays with AI and all this kind of stuff, I wish the government would be a lot more forthcoming, with things, because I do believe people can handle it, man. You just try to explain things the best way you can, and laying on the table a specimen, to prove they're out there and blah, 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 and blah, blah, blah. Well, they're finding things every freaking day they never knew was on this earth, species that they never found. So, I believe there's billions and billions of things in our world that we don't even know about, that we haven't found yet. And I think the Sasquatch and the alien presence is just another one of them keys, It's very profound. I tell my kids about it all the time and stuff like that, and they're like, Dad, you're crazy. I'm like, well, I said, okay, I'm crazy. I said, most people that do see one and talk about it, people say you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about, and stuff. Yep. But I know in my heart what I seen that night, and I got 11 other guys that seen the same thing that I did. So, that validates me 100%, because, even though we were told not to talk about it, we know what we saw. Our night vision goggles, they go up to about like 100 yards that we can see pretty good with. And like I said, this thing was like 45, 50 yards in front of all of us, and we got a good picture of both of them. So yeah, I know what I saw. Nobody ever tell me different. It's wholeheartedly in my heart. I mean, I would take a polygraph test right now, if somebody want to give me one, because I know what I saw. They're out there, man. And I don't think, it's just like human beings. You got good ones, you got bad ones. Most of all the Sasquatch encounters I heard, it's all good. They're not bad. They're not bad creatures towards humans and stuff like that. But I do believe, if you corner one and put him in a situation to where he's got to defend himself, he'll do just like any other person would do. They would defend themselves, and try to protect themselves and do what they have to do. And unfortunately, these things are so big, if they were to grab you, you'd be done. I mean, it's just, you take the biggest guys in the world like Andre Giant and all that kind of stuff. They don't even have the power nowhere near what these things is. Because like I said, the first one I seen, I say he weighed 1,000 pounds. And I could see the muscles on him. He looked like 10 times what any bodybuilder would look like. But he was covered in hair from head to toe. His nose didn't have no hair on it. Around just a little bit under his eyes, around his the bottom of his eyes didn't have no hair on it. You couldn't see his any teeth or anything like that. But yeah, and I would never forget his eyes. You know, when I looked through my night vision goggles and he was like looking around, and I seen his eyes. That's one thing that always stay with me. Just the look, it looked human, but it didn't look human. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you know what I mean, but you know, it looked exactly like a human in a big fur suit and everything like that. Little conical shaped head, really not no neck. I mean, it was just massive neck. I mean, it's almost like his chin was on his chest, but you could tell it had a neck, but it was like, I would say it was probably 15 to 20 inches around this creature's neck was. So it's 100% muscle. I mean, these things are made to climb mountains, you know, do what they got to do, live out in the wild and stuff. So yeah, they're very powerful creatures, and thank God they don't they have problems with us, because I tell you what, there's a lot of people hunting, hiking, and camping out there. If they wanted to be violent, it wouldn't be too much most people could do about it.
Yeah. Could you tell, like in the eyes, did it have like color in his eyes, like an iris and all that? Like we
Yeah.
did?
Well, yeah. When when I was looking through my night vision, you know, it picks up heat and stuff like that, but it had a reflective lens to it, which showed back to me like white, because our spectrum of our night vision goggles, it only picks up certain details. But every time he blinked, it almost come back like a little shiny, like little white star in both of his eyes. And I believe that was the moonlight reflecting off his eyes, because I do believe they have probably better night vision than they do day vision, if you ask me. You know, just from my search for it, because the way it moved around, the way it bent down and was feeding itself with blueberries. I mean, we were walking in that field, another field that had the same thing, and we didn't have our night vision goggles on. I couldn't see a blueberry one. I just thought we were stepping on brush. But this thing was able to see what it was eating and doing. And like I said, it knew we were there, but I don't know if it just didn't smell us right, or we were just in the right place, you know. But like I said, it kept putting its nose up in the air trying to, you know, catch our scent, because he knew something was wrong. You know, he just knew. And then when the other ones joined it, same thing. They knew something was wrong, but they just couldn't, you know, figure out what was going on. And like I said, they just subtly just walked off together, and that was it. You know, I was like, okay, all right, well, now we got to deal with this. And I'm like I said, well, I got with my buddies and everything. We're talking, and they're like, man, that's crazy, man. I said, yeah, it is. I said, you know, I said, well, if y'all didn't believe now, what do you believe? They're like, well, I believe there's a Bigfoot, because we definitely seen two of them.
Absolutely. And, you know, it sounds like your higher ups, it sounds like they've dealt with this before. So,
Yeah, it's a lot of things that's classified in the military and stuff like that, or in our own government and everything. I mean, I'll tell you right now, like 90% of like all the what do you call UFOs they see, that's our own stuff in the government. We have about 90% of things that we redone and made for us. Probably 10% of the other UFOs you see are probably actually aliens, but our government has been in this business for a long time, you know, way back when, you know, when Roswell and everything happened. So, yeah, I mean, you just look at the way our world has advanced since, you know, those days. We went from transistors to fucking, you know, fiber optics and all this kind of stuff. We advanced so fast, it's not actually in our, what would you say, a time span that we would have all this knowledge. It came upon us in the last 30 or 40 years. Because you remember back in the day when you had no cell phones, you know, and all of a sudden, bam, you got a cell phone that can do just exactly what big computers can do. Well, where did all that knowledge come from? And within 20 years, we just don't evolve stuff that fast. I believe they're out there trying to help us. You know, they say we always see them over nuclear facilities and stuff like that. You know, you hear people talk when I was in the military about different stuff like that, and I believe they're just out there checking on us. You know, keeping us. You know, trying to make mankind a better. You know, better people, because they want to see us succeed. Because if they were really out there and they were, you know, violent and stuff, they would already destroy us. Because, you know, they're 10 million or whatever years advanced than us. We wouldn't even stand a chance if these things were violent. They would destroy the whole world and we'd be undone. But I believe they're trying to work with us to better us, to give us better knowledge, better medicine, you know, better equipment. But you know how everything works. You know, it's all about that dollar. You know, it's all about that dollar.
Yeah, we're the violent ones, really, the human race.
Oh,
But
oh God, yes, we are. I mean, we've been killing each other since the beginning of time, and we're going
mhm.
to keep on doing it. And these creatures are caught up, and I feel they're caught up in the hell of a world, because it's like being in the military. Until you actually, I deer hunt, I do a lot of duck hunting, I do a lot of everything. But until you actually hunt a man that's on the same level that you are, you don't really know what hunting is. They have all the advantages that I have, but I just got a little bit luckier than they did, and I made it through all these, tours of duty I did. But once you hunt a man and you kill a man, that's the biggest thing right there that I've ever think in the world, because duck hunting, deer hunting, and everything, more or less, you just trick these animals one time and you got yourself a deer. You got dogs to trace rabbits, they bring them by, you shoot, you got them. But yeah, I think these things are very intelligent. They're trying to stay away from us if all is possible. I do believe that, they let a few select people, I don't know how they know it or whatever, but they present themselves and let some people see them, and the way they are. Because, there's millions of people out there that never seen one, but then you got 1,000 people have seen them and seen them multiple times all over the world, all over the country.
Right, and that's why I asked you if you've had any more encounters, because usually when somebody sees one, it kind of opens up the gates and they see more later on.
Right.
So.
Well, I'm gonna tell you what. I spent almost 5.5 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'm sorry to say, there's most of it's desert and everything like that. There's some mountainous areas over there with trees and everything. But if I was a Sasquatch, that would be one place I would not want to be living, because all the bombing and all the the fighting going on. That's no place for a tranquil animal to live in. That's an environment it does not want to be in. I didn't want to be in it, but it was my job to be there.
Thank you so much for coming on here and telling us that. That was a hell of a story. Do you mind if I use this later to rebroadcast?
No, man. Put it out there, man. I enjoy people, stop being afraid of these things, and that people that seen stuff and afraid to come forward and say something, maybe, this will urge them, to come forth and tell their stories. The more stories we get about these things, the more people can put it in perspective and believe in it, and stop all this. It's not real. You didn't see what you seen, blah, 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 whatever. Yeah. The more people we have behind us, the better off. The people like me and you that believe in these things, the better off we'll be.
Well, I believe it. You know it because you've seen it firsthand. So
I know
I haven't
it.
seen one yet.
I know it, man. I tell you what, I have, I have PTSD, from a lot of stuff I seen in combat and everything. But that is only this recurring dream I have is in the Blue Ridge Mountains with me and my unit seeing them Sasquatches.
Wow.
That is the only dream I have, and I think I dream about it like 2 times a week. Every week of my life, I dream about it, and it's it's always the same thing, but might be just a little bit different and stuff. But it is definitely burnt into my memory. I mean, it is. I mean, I don't even have to close my eyes. I'm sitting here right now, talking to you, and I'm reliving it over again. Not even closing my eyes, not even being asleep, because I know it's real. I seen it. I heard the noise. I seen what I seen. I've talked to other people, seen the same thing. All my guys seen the same thing. So I'll go to my grave hoping this is true. Like I said, you want to give me a polygraph test, I'll take it, and I'll be glad to do it, because yeah, they're out there. And like I said, I just hope more people come forward with their stories and let everybody know what they've seen. That way we can bring this more into the spotlight, and people might take it more serious, and start, thinking about humanity, about there are innocent things out there in this world, and they're, pretty close to being human like we are. But thank God they don't have the killer mentality that our society has in them. They're just there to survive, and make a living, raise their families, and, do what they got to do. So yeah, anything you can do to put the word out there, I greatly appreciate it.
Absolutely, and I definitely will. Well, thanks again, Tim, and again, thank you for your service. And I'm
Yes, sir.
glad I brought you on here. That's a great story.
No problem, sir. Thank you very much. You have a great day.
You too, man. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.